My name is Josh Miller. I own Riverstone Kennels, and I've been training gun dogs for more than 16 years. I have field trialed, I've hunt tested, but at the end of the day, I'm a duck hunter. You might find that the duck in our Duck Dogs podcast is spelled uniquely. The UK stands for my British Labs. I love my British Labs. I love what they offer me, both as a part of my family and the high motor in the field. As you're going to find, I have some pretty special dogs. Follow along in our podcast series here as we talk about both in the field hunting and in the field training situations that will hopefully help you progress with your dog at home. Welcome to another episode of Duck Dogs, everybody. I am Josh Miller, and here to bring you another episode. Thank you for spending another week with me. Before we get into it, let's make sure to thank our sponsors. DUK is the presenting sponsor of this podcast. But DUK Premium Performance Sport 3020 is the blend of food that I feed my dogs and would highly recommend anyone looking into it. Yeah, I'm really coming into the end of my season here, or just finished my season, and one thing that I cannot get over is how good my dogs look. In years past, on different foods, my dogs looked depleted. They looked underweight. They looked, you could tell that they were tired. And I am not having that right now. And I could not love this anymore. So go check it out. DUK Premium Performance Sport 3020. They also have different blends. If you don't want to feed as high of a fat protein ratio, go check them out. DUK. Also, thank you to Sitka Gear. If you're looking for the premium clothing to be wearing, and what I'm finding is not only in the field, the field stuff is a no-brainer, but I'm wearing Sitka pants right now. I'm wearing a Sitka pullover right now. Even their everyday stuff, I just love it. So Sitka Gear, www.sitkagear.com. I can't talk today. This is going to be a long episode. Go check them out. You will not be disappointed. So, what am I doing? Well, I just got back from the Great American Outdoor Show. And let me kind of tell you about that show, because that's been a wild ride of a show. So, years ago, it was, just another sports show. Would go and I would speak on that show on behalf of Sport Dog for the most part, and just go do my thing, right? So I'd go, talk to people about dogs, about my dogs, tell some stories. And then a few years ago, I think this was probably, holy cow, this was probably like 4 years ago now. The show, who was owned, the way I understand it, they were owned by a company or organization that was over, I don't even know where, somewhere overseas somewhere. And they decided to start to kind of push this like anti-gun rhetoric, where they were not going to allow any company that had anything to do with an AR in any way, shape, or form be a vendor at the show. They were going to limit, it was like a laundry list of things. And yeah, I was pretty proud of myself and the number of people that said, you know what, no, and pulled out. Every speaker that I'm aware of, every speaker that was set to speak, including myself, said, we're not coming. Vendors started pulling out left and right and literally shut down the show because everybody took a stand. That was probably the most significant thing that I've been a part of in the outdoor industry, and it was moving to watch it all happen, right? And I remember, the first person to call me was Lee Lukoski. And, Lee Lukoski called me and he's like, dude, like, are you hearing this? I'm like, yeah, man, like, not okay. We had our conversation, and we both agreed we're not going. And it was really interesting how, the dominoes, fell from that point forward. And really a cool thing. And so anyway, fast forward to today, the NRA stepped in, picked up the show, and of course have it going, as is. But it's an amazing show. It's in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and when I say amazing, I mean it amazingly big. It is huge. There are halls after halls of booths and vendors and different things going on, and it's really neat. There's a lot of different things going on. But what I do is I go and I give my seminars and my presentations. And quite honestly, the year that I guess would have been last year when COVID shut all the seminars down, that's the reason this podcast is even here today. I enjoy giving seminars so much. I enjoy looking in the audience, and I enjoy when I have a story or a point or a tip that I can see just hits home with people. Their eyes light up, they smile, they nod, they're engaging. The reason I love that so much is that I feel like I'm making an impact. I feel like I'm giving you something that you can go home, use with your dog so that you can build a better relationship with your dog. That is extremely rewarding for me. I don't get paid a penny to do it, but it's extremely rewarding to me. I hope that this podcast is the same thing. It's harder to feel that fulfillment because I can't see it, right? I can't see your faces. I can't see how you're accepting or not accepting this information. But what I do like about this podcast is I can be more blunt. As you can imagine, I have to be much more politically correct when I'm on stage, when I'm speaking, at a show on behalf of a company. And, what's really neat, all of our sponsors here, Eukanuba, Sitka, Gundog Supply, Lucky Duck. I mean, I was very honest with them that I was going to be blunt. I was going to be honest. I was going to be the truth of this is it. It is what it is. And every one of them were like all for it. That is awesome. And that's, one of the big reasons that these companies are here. But, now getting back to the seminars, it's neat to have both now. It's rewarding in different ways. I get to do this one obviously on a weekly basis, which is way more engaging than, the show circuit, if you will, that only happens once every so often. And so I really enjoy that. What I don't enjoy is the travel over there. So it's supposed to be like a 17-hour drive, which very quickly turns into 19 because I'm stopping with the dogs to let them out, fuel, food, everything else, right? So it gets to be a very long drive. Well, this year it took me 4 days to get out there because of weather. I mean, it was like crazy snow. I was going 30 miles an hour on the interstate. I've driven through cornfields that were smoother than the interstate was at times with all the drifts and everything going on. And so it was just a stressful, frustrating drive out there. But once out there, it's always rewarding, and so it was fun to be out there. There were a couple things that kind of came from my time out there I wanted to share with you guys, and again, I'm just kind of going off of stories, and because certain stories hit home, I thought I'd share some of that with you guys, because if the stories are hitting home for them, hopefully they'll hit home for you too. One thing I always talk about is tools. What tools do you use in training? What tools can you take home and help you be successful no matter what the situation? So the first one that I always talk about is the place board. And so a lot of you guys that follow along here know what the place board is. It's a board, could be a bed. It's just an area that when you ask your dog to get on it, they stay there until they come off. The reason this is so big for people is that I'm really going to preach this going forward, the big three. I believe that if your dog did 3 things, they would be viewed as essentially the perfect dog. Those 3 things are calm, quiet, and under control. The athletic part, the hunting part, that's going to take care of itself. That dog either has it or it doesn't. And then from there, it's the work that you put into him. But you could have an all-star dog as far as a hunter goes. And if they are not those 3 things, calm, quiet, and under control, it is not going to be viewed as that is an elite dog. On the flip side, you could have a dog that is not that caliber of an athlete, is maybe a little more lackadaisical, maybe doesn't have a crazy strong retrieve drive, but if they are calm, quiet, and under control, you are going to get invited back to more places. You are going to enjoy your time in the field that much more, and that dog is going to be a pleasure to go with you no matter where you go. Doesn't matter if it's the kids' baseball game, doesn't matter if it's a walk down the street, doesn't matter if it's in your home. Calm, quiet, and under control. And that's the one thing I really preached out there at that show. And it's something I'm going to continue to preach going forward because I really believe it. And I think when you really come down to understanding the expectations and understanding that the expectations you have for your dog, your dog may not live up to them, right? So I have 2 kids. I have Ava, who's going to be 3, my son Colt, who is 1, and naturally I have dreams and aspirations for them. Just because I was a college athlete does not mean that my son is going to be. Might mean he's 10 times better than me. It might mean he never touches a ball in his life. Naturally, as a dad, you have certain hopes, right? You have certain things that maybe you selfishly, hope for. But I'm not going into it thinking that he has to be what I was, otherwise he's a failure. And a lot of you, listening to this are like, well, yeah, duh. Why do we think differently with dogs? Why do we think because that dad was a master hunter retriever champion that this puppy better be? So expectations. So if you set that aside and you focus on having a calm, a quiet, and an under control dog, the rest of it is going to take care of itself because the rest of it is that natural side that you can nurture, you can bring out, you can harness, but you can't put it into him. Calm, quiet, under control. Those 3 things. Think about any hunting situation that you have ever been in. If those 3 things are there, that was a positive experience. Think of going to a friend's house. If they have a dog that's calm, quiet, under control, that's a positive experience. If that dog is whiny, if that dog is pacing, if that dog is barking, if that dog is trying to jump on everybody, that is not a positive experience. Calm, quiet, under control. You're going to get sick of hearing me say that. That's how much I believe that. So that was one thing I really talked about. A lot of people, I think, really, that resonated with them of, okay, I get that. Going back to the place board is, the reason I was kind of pushing that was a lot of people just don't know how to keep their dog under control. Place board is a great way to do that. And if you've never seen it before, it's definitely an aha moment. Oh my gosh, I can have a command where they go on a spot and they don't move from. Light bulb goes off, right? Like that's a huge, huge tool. There's a lot of people that had questions on how do I get my dog to bring the bumper back to me? Well, that's obedience, right? Obedience is teaching place. Obedience is when they get that bumper in their mouth, you tell them to place, they come back to your side where the place board is strategically placed. It's amazing how many questions came up, whether it's how do I get my dog to come back to me? How do I get my dog to quarter better? How do I get my dog to whistle sit? How do I get my dog to recall in the field? It's all obedience. It is all the thing. It is all those things. The number one issue is the one thing that we all want to skirt around, the obedience side. It's not sexy. We can't put it on Instagram. We can't show it off, right? We want to get past it. But it's the one thing that you come back to, and when you have an issue, it is the root of 99% of the time. It's incredible. It really is, especially at a seminar like that where you get a lot of questions. It is incredible how much of it comes down to obedience. The next thing that really jumped out at me was I use handler leads. And so if you go on Gun Duck Supply, well, actually, let's take a quick 2-second break here and thank our next 2 sponsors. GunDuckSupply.com, your one-stop shop for all of your hunting and training needs. You're going to hear me talk about why here in a second with this next tip. And also thank you to Lucky Duck. Lucky Duck is the 5-star crash test rated kennel, both large and intermediate. They are fantastic. They are awesome. My wife loaded 2 of them up in the back of her Tahoe this morning as she had 2 dogs to take to progesterone tests, checking progesterone levels for breeding, and she can move them. The dogs are safe. It is awesome. So go check them out. Lucky Duck, www.luckyduck.com. So I use handler leads. Handler leads. So if you go on Gun Dog Supply and you look up RPM like the motor. I'm not a motorhead, right? But motor RPMs, right? RPM, and then handler's lead. RPM is the brand name. They make a great handler's lead. And what a handler's lead was essentially made for was for the handler that is at a hunt test or at a field trial that just needs a short little lead to be able to slip on the dog, slip off when it's time to go work, can roll it up, put it in their back pocket. It's out of the way, and then it's small enough where they can take it out of that pocket, flip it back on, and finish. But I've been using my handler leads for the last few years as my go-to leads when I'm working with clients. And so what I want you to picture is a very, very short lead. There's enough to go around the dog's neck as a slip lead, go around the dog's neck, and then enough to basically comfortably have at your hand. Okay, so the dog's at heel, around the neck, enough to your hand. We've always talked about pressure on and pressure off, right? So like pressure on when the dog does something wrong, pressure off when they do it right, and that's how we communicate with these dogs, is that this is incorrect, this is correct. I ask you to sit and you don't sit, the pressure comes on. The second your butt hits the ground, pressure comes off. I'm telling you that you're doing this correctly. It's all communication, right? But heel is something that a lot of people struggle with. They want the dog right at their side, but the dog likes to be a half step ahead. The dog likes to lag behind. And a lot of times it's just because we have not very clearly been able to communicate with the dog that this is incorrect. You think about that. Very tough for a dog to understand that a half step ahead is incorrect. Unless you're consistent every single time correcting that dog that a half step ahead is incorrect, you may get frustrated with it, but the dog may not truly understand that it is incorrect. So how do you communicate? So back to the handler leads. So again, short enough to go around the dog's neck, up to your hand, and you can comfortably walk. They're very short. But with it being short, if the dog does go ahead a step, naturally, the pressure is going to apply, right, with that slip lead. The dog feels the pressure, comes back a step to the perfect heel, pressure releases. The dog lags behind, pressure on. The dog goes, oh, I feel the pressure, gets up a step, back to your side where you want them to be, pressure is off. It's amazing how that tool has allowed me to very quickly teach a dog, this is where you have to be, and then to go home, because when we get dogs in for training, it's always the most difficult part of the whole process is how do we send dogs home with the owners able to be successful, because they're not going to have the routine we have at the kennel. They're not going to be able to train every day like we do. They're not going to have all the tools at our disposal that we have, right? Like, how do you do this? How do you take all of your work and get it to go home seamlessly? Very, very, very difficult. Tools like this have allowed it, they're easy, they're simple, they're basic, and they've allowed that transition to be much more smooth. So why is this important? So I'll tell you a little story of why this kind of popped in my head of like, this is something I need to do. So my grandpa Harry, an incredible figure in my life. When he would pick us, so I had four boys in my family. So as you can imagine, it was chaos all the time. And it wasn't often, but every so often, Grandpa would come into town and take care of us for a few days. So he would pick us up from school. And I remember two things from when he would pick us up from school. One, and I don't know why this is, but he would always take us through the Burger King drive-thru and get us all milkshakes. That was like his thing. We loved when Grandpa picked us up from school. We loved it. But he would always get us those milkshakes. Then we would get home, and after we get settled in, he'd always say, all right, guys, you got 10 minutes to go clean your room. And so we'd run to try to beat the clock, 10 minutes, clean our room the best we could. And after a long time after I grew up and, just kind of start thinking about, these things pop up into your memories, right? I asked him, I said, Grandpa, why did you always do that? And he kind of laughed because he didn't remember actually doing it at first. Then we kind of talked about it. He's like, oh, yeah. And so he's like, so again, I'd ask, why 10 minutes? What was significant about 10 minutes? Was there something you were trying to do? Was there something we were trying to get to? And his response was, I felt like it was pretty profound, which was, I gave you 10 minutes because if I would have given you 10 hours, it would have taken you 10 hours. That comment had a significant impact. This was years ago that I asked him this now, because now I've taken that same thought into my training, but also my same thought into when I send dogs home. Okay, so if I send home a new owner that has a very obedient dog and I hand them a 6-foot leash, they are naturally going to give that dog 6 feet. They're just going to. And if they're not going to, someone in their household is going to, right? Whether it's, mom or dad or vice versa. And don't jump to conclusions thinking that dad's always the firm one that follows through. It is oftentimes mom. It is oftentimes, that mom is the one that follows through. She's the one that, I think the biggest reason for me is she listens. Us guys maybe don't do as good a job of listening as we should. And so everything doesn't always sink in. But I can tell, when someone's at the table and we're going through kind of our go home, notes and our plan, and here's what we want you to do going home, like it's pretty significant. And so, but kids are a huge part of this. Your kids likely are not going to work with the dog consistently. They're not going to follow through with the commands. They're not going to make the dog do something when they ask them to. And so naturally, we develop a gray area that is going to provide the dog room for error, which means the dog is going to push on us at some point inevitably, which means it's going to cause some frustration. Again, expectation-wise, we just have to know that with house dogs. This will be a podcast topic of mine at some point because it's a hot button for me that when I see issues come up, it's one I just want to rant on. But when we have house dogs, we have to understand the situation we're putting the dogs in. We are naturally developing gray area. We're naturally developing times that they can get away with things. And so when we go out in the field, we cannot get frustrated when the dog isn't perfect. We put that. Now, I also think it's a great thing. My dogs are in the house. My dogs are in the house. They're playing with my kids. My kids are yelling at them. My Ava last night was sit, and walked away. And, Clyde was sitting there looking at me. And I'm like, okay, he wasn't sitting. So I just know that, and I see it. If my dogs are around, specifically the kids, for an extended period of time, I know they're going to be a little sloppier than what they should. The kids bring a different energy. It's more fun. They're not going to fall through, right? So we just have to know that, expectation-wise. But going back to the handler lead, the reason I send them home with the handler lead is the same thing. Okay, Grandpa, so if I gave you 10 minutes to clean your room, it will take you 10 minutes. If I gave you 10 hours, it will take you 10 hours. For most people, that's 100% true. So how do I apply this at home? How do I apply this now in my work that I can make people more successful going home? I give them a lead that doesn't give them the opportunity to let the dog make a mistake. That short lead, unless you exaggerate your hand forward to intentionally let the dog have way more room, that dog is going to have a much better understanding that I'm supposed to be right at heel. Now, the downside of it is you can't walk away from the dog. Like a 6-foot lead, you can tell the dog to sit, walk away 6 feet, call them to you, stuff like that. Pros and cons. But heel is the one that I really see people struggle with keeping consistency of. Okay, so that was a big one as I looked at the overall scheme of the show. Like, what were the aha moments? That was a big one. The last one is, this was the first time I've ever done this. If you've listened to this podcast at all, you probably have a pretty good idea that I am big into mindset. I am big into discipline. I am big into holding yourself accountable. I'm big into just the self-development part of life. But then as it results to, or as it goes with the dog side of things, mindset is something I have started to preach more and more and more. The mental approach that you have with your dog, the mental approach that you bring into a training session, the mental approach of how you walk through, a dog's career, a dog's life, let alone a training session. How do you mentally walk through a training session? And this is something I'd love feedback on this. If you guys shoot me a message on Instagram, I think my Instagram is Josh_Miller_2 or something like that. But look me up, shoot me a message. I'd love to hear your feedback on this. But I think at some point I'm actually going to do a mental series on this, because I have a number of different things as I look at the mental side of what makes someone successful with handling their dog versus a quote unquote failure. It has everything to do with your mental approach, and I have a number of things kind of broken down, and I talked about some of this, and I could tell some of it was like right over people's heads as they're thinking a dog's a dog, like this doesn't apply. But there was a lot of people that are like, this is awesome. I could see it. I saw the smiles. I saw the engagement. I saw people like, this is something different. I've never talked about that in a seminar before. And it was actually a question. I can't remember what the question was, but the question like threw me in that direction. And it was something I was like, oh my gosh, like this was great. And it's something that I think the reason I've never talked about in a seminar before is that it can be, a little over the top, right? So if you look at me as I'm just a dog trainer, you might look at me and be like, who are you to talk about the mental side of things, right? But when you start digging into, my like college athletics, did you know that we had baseball practice in college and then we also had mental practice? This was something we spent a lot of time on, the mental side. Okay, what about the business side of things? Riverstone Kennels, a lot of people don't know this, Riverstone Kennels in 2012, I believe it was, might have been 2014, I can't remember now, but there was a year that Riverstone Kennels won Emerging Business of the Year for the state of Wisconsin from WBD, Wisconsin Business Development. Emerging Business of the Year, you know how many businesses are in the state of Wisconsin? Right? But it's because of the approach that I took while building it, right? The very next year, I was runner-up for Emerging Entrepreneur of the Year for the state of Wisconsin. I was runner-up because the person that won was incredible person. I did not deserve that one. But there's a lot that goes into this, and when it all circles back around, it has to do with leadership. Why is leadership important? Because that's what your dog looks at you as, is a leader. How do you lead? So it all comes full circle. Falling in love with the process. That's something, that's like my mantra, right? It's like boom, boom, boom. Fall in love with the process. Fall in love with the process. I say it way too much. I say it all the time because it is such a big part of this. But that's what this is. This is your leadership and how you work with your dog, and whether you're successful or not, it has to do with, have you fallen in love with the process and how do you lead? I have a client that just took a dog home. His name is Alex. Alex, I think Alex is one of my absolute favorite clients I've ever had, because he's a super successful guy. He's crazy intelligent. He understands, and he understands like the things that I'm saying and why I say it. Like I can just, we have that relationship, right? And so this is a guy that has fallen in love with the process. His first dog, Scout, is like, he was mature before his time from the get-go. Like at 8 months old, you would have thought he was 2.5, right? He just had this like demeanor about him. He flew through training. He like went through all of his handling fantastically. He is an awesome dog, but he's just now 3. And, so Alex now picks up his new pup, who is, I think he's probably like 7-8 months old, if I'm guessing, and different dog. Crazy high ceiling, crazy potential, but different dog. Not maturity-wise, not where Scout was. Alex has fallen in love with the process. I called Alex on his way home, like, hey, man, because I missed him when I was coming home from the show, and I was like, hey, how'd everything go? And he's like, man, it's great. He's definitely a different dog, right? Different dog, different approach. He's not as mature, but this didn't faze Alex at all. And actually what he did is he talked about Scout. And he's like, man, like Scout's year 1 to 2, like the light bulb went off. Like you could see like, the year, not this last year, but the year before, you could see how things were clicking. It was so fun to sit and watch him. It was fun to see him really start to be successful. And that was like his first year applying, all this training. And he's like, man, like year 3 was even more fun because I watch him now be able, to do things that he struggled with the year before with this extra year of experience, extra year of confidence, and like watch the next development. That like to me, I was smiling the whole time he's saying this because I'm like, he gets it. Like he gets that this is a process. He gets that the dog is going to continue to develop all the time, and he also gets that his young dog is not his old dog. That's mindset. That's why Alex is successful. That's why he's successful with his dog, or that's why he's successful with Scout. That's why he's successful with, whether it's, his new dog now or any other dog he has in the future. That's why he's successful in his business. That's why he's successful in everything, is because of his mindset. He has the right mindset. He has the right approach. At some point, you probably tell how jacked up I get about this whole thing. At some point, again, love your feedback, but I think I'd love to do a mental series on how it pertains to dog training and how it pertains to being successful with working with your dog. Let's do a mental series. Something to think about. But with that, I am going to sign off because I've got a ton of work that I have to catch up on. Being away for a week at that show, it feels like I've been away for much longer, and I just came back from hunting season, so I've just got a ton I got to catch up on. But I hope you guys have a great weekend. I hope you have a great rest of the week, and I will talk with you next week. Thanks for listening. Be sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Leave us a review on iTunes, and a special thank you to DUK because without them, we couldn't do what we do here, bringing this information to you.